Welcome to Outa-space, International Arts and Class Travel Podcast.
On this week's show, interview with Mike Haas, Games, Creativity and Human Society. Commentary with Paul Paranoid in the space station. And with Jonas Langer this week in the engine room, we have some poems by Steve Nally from his collection, COVID Dreams. Hello, I'm Rob McDonald and I'm the host presenter of Outa-space podcast. And today I've got my guest is Mike Haas. Hi Mike, how you doing?
Hi Rob, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good man. So Mike, you're based in Barcelona. You're originally from the Boston in the US. Mm-hmm. As I know you, you're a photographer, a filmmaker. You particularly are well known for collage making, and you do workshops and you curate things. And for the purposes of today's show, you're a board game developer. So that's who I think you are. Who do you think you are? Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. It sounds great.
Well, it sounds better than it is, eh?
No, I think I usually consider myself, when I introduce myself, it's, artist, then game designer, and then educator. I think that's also a big part of what I do, workshops and teaching.
Okay, so yeah, artists first, because on this show we talk a lot about people, whether they self-identify as artists, and you put that one right at the top, yes. So that covers all the different things that you do. Yeah,
I'd say artist as foundational, and then everything else sort of like is branches off of that. Cool,
man. So today we're going to talk about games. Okay, this is the big thing you're into at the moment. You make board games. I've seen your stuff. It looks super cool. But we want to talk a little bit more in depth rather than about any particular game. We want to talk about what are games? What is the basic of a game, and what's the relationship towards humans? I mean, how does it work? For a game developer, you must think about these kind of things all the time. So have you got an answer for that?
Well, it's a tricky thing to answer. And I think the best way to do it would be to start as specific as possible and then sort of branch out. And I think for our conversation right now, it'd be important to put together some sort of constraints about what we're talking about.
Okay.
So when I'm talking about games today, I'm talking strictly sort of like recreational activities with some kind of like written or established rules. There has to be a way to win. There has to be a way to lose. And also importantly is like they're sort of self-contained experiences, which is to say that if I lose this game, I don't also then like lose money or lose my house or it's all sort of like
it's a thing in itself. It's not connected.
Exactly.
It's a separate sort of activity. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, sort of like specifically excluding sports and gambling and things like that. It's more sort of
mates sitting down with like cards and things like this. This is the kind of without the money, obviously, if you're not talking about gambling.
Right.
So where does this really start with humanity? I mean, when do we start doing games? When do they start producing them?
Well, pretty early on. There's some like circumstantial archaeological evidence that of boards of Mancala, which is a really elegant early game from like 6,000 years ago around Jordan.
Okay.
But the first games that we really know about, like have the game and the board and the rules, is also in the Middle East, a game called Senate from around 3,500 BCE from Egypt, and then the game of Ur from 2600 BCE, around that.
So basically, if we're talking about games that have rules and certain constraints like you put on just a minute ago, we're actually, when we're talking about them, you're talking about the beginning of known human civilizations, basically.
Basically, is the moment that we began to sort of build and play with social contracts, and like this sort of like, this is the situation in which we're interacting, and this is how the rules are. And once we're able to establish those and abstract them a little bit, that's when we're talking about games.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I know we've got some constraints on it, but just to divert, just a tad, because on the show we talk about one of the hypotheses of the show is that art creation is very much that creative moment when a human being has to solve a problem. And the other day I was having another interview, and we talk about food as it happens. And we were talking about that early civilization, before civilizations, hunter-gatherer type human beings, that they would need the creative moment to build the shelter. The art creation itself was very much about learning how to be a human, and is inside of us. And in the same way, it strikes me when we talk about games, we're talking about the word play. And we're talking about, when we talk about children, and this is one of the mistakes of modern society, I think, we talk about children, let the children play. What about the fucking adults? I want to play, But the thing is, it's very much of a learning thing. You have to play in the same way as you have to have this creative moment to build the shelter, to create the first food, to survive. What do you think is the relationship between play, creative work, and board games? Is there a relationship there, do you think?
I mean, there's absolutely a relationship. And I think I'm sort of, the way I'm picturing it right now is play is to walking as games are to running. It's like you have to be able to play. And I think I completely agree. Play is an essential part of being alive, not even just being human, but being alive. And it is where we can explore those social contracts that I was talking about and be dynamic with them and flexible. And it can be today, like right now I'm a jaguar, and in 10 minutes I want to be an eagle. Like kids do that all the time when they're playing.
I do that still all the time as well.
Right. And that's where like the flexibility and the learning and experimenting comes in. And then with games, it's a little bit more mature. I'm putting the air quotes, and it's a little bit more structured and
this is interesting.
Codified.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just to continue on this sort of comparison with art. Obviously, it's an art podcast, and we talk about games, and creating games is an art. But for me, the creative moments is when you have to think creatively to solve a problem. That's the beginning of art, but that's not necessarily an artifact. It's not necessarily the sculpture or the painting. And so what you're saying there about the relationship between play and board games is a bit like the evolution of a thing. So the creative moment is when you think to have to do something, and then to create a piece of art is like it's a higher level, and then above that is culture, which is like everybody's conception of what art is. Is it sort of like that? Is it you sort of bending it like that? I mean, I know I'm taking you down a rabbit hole. I'm just interested because it sort of bends with what the podcast is about.
I mean, it's a good question, and I think I can answer it best if I talk about sort of like how I got into game design as a thing.
Yeah,
right. I've spent the last 15 years studying or making art one way or another, first photography, then collage. And it was only in the last like 4 or 5 years that I've discovered game design as a new creative output. And it was the moment that really hooked me was when I was sort of messing around with a game that I already owned and trying to like be like, this is cool, I really like it, but it could be better. And I played this improved version with some friends, and I watched my friends interact with the mechanics that I had introduced to create a more immersive in a more enjoyable experience. And it was that moment of watching people interact with what I've done that like totally blew my mind a little bit.
Because as artists, that's what that's like our cocaine, isn't it? You know, it's that's what we're after. We're hunting for people to respond to something.
Well, and it was that moment where I realized that games doesn't replace art, because they're not necessarily comparable that way, but it is like to watch someone physically touch and interact with not only themselves in the game, but then everyone else around the table, and creating a small sort of like self-contained community around your designs was like about as good as I've ever felt creating anything.
That's very interesting. I mean, so what role does it play in society? I mean, that's the role it plays for you. You're getting a kick out of it, and you're talking about something deeper there, aren't you? You know, you're talking about, you know, around the campfire after you've eaten whatever we've eaten, and then let's do this game. Let's do this social interaction. What role does it play, do you think?
I mean, it's a complicated question to answer, because I think it fits several roles at the same time. I've had put together a little bit of, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I put together this sort of like structure where I have a game as a status symbol, sort of beyond just having this artifact of this thing that you own, which, you know, is a thing. There's always this sort of, you want to win. There's this sort of, I'm sort of thinking back to like playing games with my friends, and there's some of my friends who just always kept winning, and it became this sort of like personality around the game. That was part of our life. You have game, I think, is also a really important tool in education, the same way that playing is important in our learning as humans and as living creatures. I think games provide a structured way of learning, which is really important. And then you have a conversation that's happening right now, which is games as entertainment versus games as service. And part of that, a significant part of that, is actually like an economic conversation that's happening. But also there's this shift happening recently around games as this thing that you do with some friends on a quiet night just to have a good time and pass some whatever. And then there's this idea that like games are an essential part of our like daily life and can be structured in a way that creates sort of like the forever game that's sort of always with us. And so I think I sort of walked around your question, but that's sort of, it's all of those things, and some games are more of that than others, but they all sort of like fit that.
That's a fair answer. I mean, something bizarre has happened to me in the COVID years, let's call it that, or COVID year so far. It could be years. My family, I'm very close to my family, but we're not super close, you know, we don't see each other, we don't ring each other every day. We don't, you know, we're not that kind of family, but we do love each other, and we do occasionally like each other and those kind of things. Isn't it? You know, we have the normal spats. I'm just trying to paint a picture that I don't have a really close family. In fact, I live a long way from them. In the COVID crisis, one of the family members started a WhatsApp group. Okay, which is okay, fine, let's communicate. Is everybody okay? And then it evolved, this WhatsApp group, into a family quiz. Now, every Thursday night, that's why we couldn't do it. We were doing the podcast on a Friday. We couldn't do it yesterday. Because every Thursday night, we do a quiz. And you talking about people who always win. There's one of my cousins and my brother. It's either one of them. I fucking hate quizzes, you know. And the social positions are in there. But actually, because of the COVID, and there's isn't there like a weird sort of generalized depression fear that we all have as a species at the moment? What my family's done, without really realizing it, is created a game situation, you know, and it's fascinating. And actually, at the beginning, I was like, "Oh, fuck off! I don't want to do that." And then my partner, she said, "Oh, come on, go along to it." And so now I need it. It's kind of like, I hope the quiz night's going on, although it's not a very good idea to win because that means you have to do it the following week. And it's actually quite hard to put on a quiz. We did bingo as well at the beginning, and that's much easier. But that's kind of what you're talking about, isn't it? How this, you talk about symbol, relationships, this kind of thing. I mean,
totally. And
go on. No, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Oh no, I was going to say that, and I think one of the things that I'm really hooked on with board games in particular these days is I think there's something of a radical revolutionary act of just getting together around a table in person and like communicating, about anything, just sort of like sharing an experience together, especially now, in our concept of table, I guess, needs to expand and change a little bit because of our situation. But I do think that that's a really integral aspect, that sort of building of community in a way that games help facilitate.
I mean, I kind of think of, how does this relate to things like established board games like Monopoly? I mean, how does it, Monopoly's fucking capitalism, isn't it? It's like learn how to be a bastard. I mean, I love it because I'm very socialist. But when I play Monopoly, I can be a bastard. And I really like it. It brings out all these evil intents in me, and and this kind of stuff. But where does Monopoly or something like that fit into this concept we're talking about?
Well, and I think before like jumping into Monopoly, I think you touch on something that's really important, is that it seems like it gives you a window or like an opening to like express that and like be mean and just a jerk. But then the game's over and like whatever, no big deal, right? It creates that sort of.
And then
bubble.
At the end, of course, you didn't mind losing. That kind of. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. But Monopoly in particular is a really interesting example of sort of the evolution of games, especially like modern games, because on one side of it, it sits at a moment where games became its own industry, as we understand like modern industry to be. And the history of the game is actually very interesting because the original name of it was the Landlord's Game.
Okay.
Designed by a woman, Elizabeth Maggi, I believe. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And it was designed as like a really specific educational experience, anti-capitalistic, specifically sort of talking about, let's see if I can get this right, Georgian economic principles.
Right. Yeah.
So
pre-Victorian.
Basically there was a academic conversation happening about capitalism versus Georgism, which, if I understand correctly, disclaimer, I'm not an economist. No. But the idea is that like the public land should be owned by the state and then rented out to people who need it, as opposed to owned by private individuals to then exploit and buy more land. Okay, so maybe a kind of state capitalist in early capitalist development, because as capitalism came into being, there was lots of different, people don't always realize this, that things are what they are, but it's never the case. So when capitalism was born, there was different tendencies within it, Exactly. And so this game was specifically designed to reflect the unfair, lopsided balance of capitalism. The game was specifically designed so that someone would eventually get more money and then start gobbling up all of the land from everyone else. And they would inevitably win because that's how the system works.
Yeah.
And the game, is like, and there's an interesting quote that I got was, Elizabeth hoped that when played by children, the game would provoke their natural suspicion of unfairness and that they might carry this awareness into adulthood. It sort of was a game that was not designed to be fun and not designed to be fair.
Bit like life then, basically.
Yeah, and then it got turned into this sort of like blank slate of a game where you can just sort of like put any
it got
location in the
over
world.
formalized, over commoditized. I mean, like most things with art, if something is good and new and creative, and the capitalism, and we've discussed this a lot on the podcast, is that it gets commodified and then loses all of its flavor. But often can continue to be something that's sellable. And Monopoly, you get Monopoly everything these days, don't you? You got Simpsons Monopoly.
It continues to be one of the most sold games in the world.
Do you think that's because it does reflect this society? It does sort of, like you were saying to me, that the game allows you to be a bit mean, or allows you to almost role play. Do you think it's because it endures because it's relevant? And we are allowed to, for a day, I'm allowed to be a rich capitalist, and I can buy whatever I want, and I can have all these feelings that I see that I'm expected to look up to. Do you think it's something like that going on?
Yeah, I think there is some part of that does that. The thing about it is that, like, I don't know if Monopoly does that the best, right? I think the success, speaking specifically of Monopoly, the success of that game has a lot to do around it is that it gives you that sort of like family friendly space to be a jerk. It is completely blank. It's just a beige game. And in terms of game design, it's actually
so it allows the human interaction to, because it's so simple in that sense.
It's so simple. It's so accessible. It's literally throw dice and do what the board tells you to do. And that's really great with younger audiences specifically. But it's also just kind of a terrible game in terms of design. Yeah. It's also one of those things where it's like, it's hard for me nowadays because I want to be able to like share all of the games that are amazing and great experiences. And every time I'm like, oh, I design board games, they're like, wow, I love Monopoly. Or like, wow, like,
yeah. It's like saying I like music and they start talking about Top of the Pops or something, it's
yeah, exactly.
I mean, that brings me on to another question really, because, we're talking about board games, okay? And we're talking about capitalism and Monopoly being shit. And I'm not a gamer and I don't dislike it. I've liked cards, but sometimes I see friends sitting around with the most complicated fucking games based on cards, and they go into different realms, and they go into, and they get, and people are obsessive about it, and there's clubs and all these kind of things. And it's a world that I'm interested in because I'm not in it. I didn't evolve into it, but lots of people I know are. So what kind of other stuff is out there now in terms of gaming? I mean, obviously Monopoly's, everybody's family's got one of them in their cupboard. But what's the cutting edge stuff? What's out there? What other kind of games can we experience?
Well, I mean, the truth is right now we're in a bit of a golden age of gaming as a whole, not just board games, not just video games, but just games and creative, that kind of entertainment as a whole. The cutting edge these days in board games specifically is this concept of a legacy game. And the idea is that you have a game, you have a box of components and a theme and everything and a story. And over the course of several playthroughs, you will be going through a story, and not only going through a story, but you're going to be taking markers and you're going to be crossing sections off the board or ripping up cards or permanently changing the game state in a way that at the end of your however many playthroughs, you will have had a hopefully completely unique gaming experience that could technically never be repeated.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I mean, just to diverge on that, again, it's like I say, I'm not a gamer person, but I remember when in my first shared house, and we were often drunk, and we thought we were going to be pop stars and all this kind of stuff. So you can imagine the kind of house it might have been. We played cards, but we developed our own card game. and we had this complicated pack of cards, which was about 5 or 6 different packs, and we drew different things on it. Like we had a nun card, and it was one of the queens, and she'd been made into a nun, and it was worth 0, and you didn't want to fucking get that because you couldn't get rid of it. And we developed this, and then we also what we did is we mixed 2 games together, and we had if somebody played a number 7, it changed the game, and it was so fucking complicated that we had to make the rules up as we went along. And so, is this the kind of, I mean, we're talking quite a few years ago now, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And it just springs to my mind when you say like a legacy game, is that what you mean? Something like that's got, it evolves as you do it.
It's similar. I don't think it's quite, what you're talking about is more like the raw game design experience. You're sort of like making a game as you're going. And I could almost say that like a legacy game is, I don't know if this is a really accurate thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, because, got to live life
on the edge. Yeah.
On the edge. It's sort of like game design deconstructed, right? Sort of with a legacy game, you're given this theoretically complete experience. And then over the course of the game, you are tearing it apart, changing it, and altering it in a way that is not as free form, I think, as that what you're talking about with your buddies, but it is that kind of evolution.
Okay. And are there other things out there that are going on? What's the game news? I mean, we're talking now about board games and purposely not drifting into the computer world, but it is. You say we're in a golden age of gaming and leisure industry and all that kind of stuff. Could you expand on that a little bit more? What's going on?
Well, another one of the sort of motors that's sort of changed the game industry in the past decade or so is the platform Kickstarter and other sort of crowd sharing platforms, Patreon and things like that.
Places, yeah.
Crowdfunding, yeah. And this idea that an independent designer could present their project to the public, and the public then says, yes, I want that. And then it gives the designer the kind of freedom and creative control that they never really had in the traditional industry. Because the traditional board game industry is a lot like writing, like the literature industry, where the designer comes up with the game, writes the rules, or builds it, tests it, things like that, and then sells all of the rights of the game to the publisher, and then they get like a 5% cut of whatever the wholesale is. Whereas Kickstarter, theoretically, all of the money that they get in those campaigns goes into the game and then to the creative, to the creative team. And it's become so successful that there are games that have pulled in like millions of dollars just to develop the game before the game is even like physical, before it's even real. And on one hand, it's created a bit of a bubble, which is problematic. And it has created sort of a tiered sense of accessibility within the industry, within the sort of hobby, where people who are spending like hundreds of dollars on these proposed games and then get like huge boxes full of plastic and rules and boards and like even for me, I consider myself
like an IKEA build it yourself game.
Totally.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
And I'm one of those. I consider myself. I've got a good head for rules. I've got a good sense of mechanics and like that. And I'm looking at these games and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here. So on one hand, you have a new open system that is theoretically more accessible for the designer, but less accessible. I don't know. It changes the accessibility for the player in a way that is okay. I'm going to say it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's strange sometimes.
I mean, I think there's a problem in general, and we will definitely be doing a podcast on the question of funding in general in lots of different ways, but on crowdfunding specifically, because it's not great. I mean, it's a bit like the internet. It is an element of liberation, but I mean, forget the fact that most of these sites take a cut, and Kickstarter is particularly bad. Other ones can be better, and depending on what your project is. But there is a problem in general with funding coming from these type of platforms, you know. But we won't go into the problems, and we won't go into the good things that much. But you are sort of starting to open up that door on that question. So I thought we'd mention it.
It's a big door.
And so with board games, there's a bit of a revolution. We're in a gold age. These things are taking place. Where's it going to go? Where's the next? What's your prediction of board games in their present evolutionary state?
Well, the next step for board games in general is going to be, I think, app-assisted games, using technology as a way to handle a lot of the administration and the sort of like...
There are games like that out there, aren't there? I mean, again, it's one of those things that I see out the corner of my eye and go, oh God. And I mean, people, they're looking for, what do they call it when because you've got that computer technology where you can, you can put your phone somewhere and see something that's actually virtually there. I can't remember the name.
Like augmented reality.
That's it. Yeah. So we've got that kind of shit going on. Is that the kind of thing you mean? Like that people can go out?
We're not quite at augmented reality yet. Although that's coming.
Yeah.
We're more. It's at this stage of the game. It's more of. It allows the designers to create a game that is mechanically extraordinarily complex, without the players needing to handle all of that blah. Because that's sort of where you can really sort of like break a game, is if you load it up too much. So it's
almost like there's going to be a mix of this technology with board games. Because actually, when I talk about my family quiz night, we start using Kahoots, which is it's an online question format thing, and it's very good. You know, we have we use our phones for hand devices to answer the questions that come on the screen. You know, we use Zoom. It's a very, very good tool. You know, and it is like we're playing a board game, but we're not. We're using modern technology. You know,
exactly.
Okay, so interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot like that.
Okay, well, I mean, I think we've covered, if you like, some of the basics of what board games are, and we wanted to start there. But I want to, as is my way on these shows, I often at the end ask a ridiculously big question. But I want to do that on purpose this week because I want us to expand on this, because we've talked about board games, but we haven't talked about, and you've touched on a number of other details about what games themselves do, but we haven't talked about computer games. We haven't talked about other types of sports games, entertainment games. We've left that aside today. So, I mean, my sort of final question is what's the other subjects that we need to go into, do you think, if we're discussing games as a broad subject?
Yeah. So one of the things I think is really important to touch on is, I mentioned it before, but this concept between games as entertainment versus games as service. That's a conversation that's happening right now around mobile games and free to play and microtransactions and the new sort of economic model around games.
So games as games as entertainment, I get, yeah. That's kind of obvious. Games as a service. What does that mean? So like you have to play a game to go and get your shopping or something like that. Is that, I mean, sorry to be ignorant, but what do you mean by games as a service?
Games as a service is this idea that you can create a game experience that will theoretically last forever. Okay. And you have a creative team that's dedicated to the game that is constantly creating new ways of interacting with the game, new storylines, new characters, new things that build out the game and your game experience. And it is primarily an economic model, but it also opens the door for a whole new way of creating sort of like gaming in your daily life that is not
So, yeah.
gamification specifically.
Okay, yes. I mean, we're almost entering this realm of algorithms, of Facebookisms, all this kind of stuff that's creeping into our general lives. And you're talking about that a little bit, maybe. And the other thing that pops into my head, which is completely off the wall again, is I mean, this show's called Outa-space podcast and it's an arts and political podcast. But I'm actually very interested in cosmology, and there's some great theories out there about the everything in existence is actually a simulation game. And actually, if you look into it, it's not as fucking crazy as you think. There's a bit of a God thing going on there, but not even that necessarily. Am I getting it right, or am I going down rabbit holes with that one?
Oh, that's a small rabbit hole, but I do think that there is another conversation that is worth having, is the conversation around the gamification of our life, which is specifically not the introduction of games in our life, but the introduction of game mechanics and psychological triggers that game designers use that now other companies are starting to implement. Like Facebook is the gamification of social interaction. Tinder is the gamification of dating. There are very interesting psychological hooks that we have as humans that get utilized in games and are now starting to be applied in a larger sense in sort of our daily life.
So there's two. There's the game is entertainment versus a service, and then there's the gamification of life. Any other sort of major headlines that you would flag up at this stage?
Well, the other thing that we sort of will be touching upon, or would be touching upon with those things, is game theory as a larger concept, which is a very dense economic mathematical model of how every interaction in humanity can be sort of brought down to a mathematical equation. It's a little crazy. I
like crazy.
think we're going to be jumping too deeply into it, but there are like several very important concepts that govern human interaction that are important to sort of like touch on.
Cool, man. Well, what do you reckon, Mike? We've had a basic discussion. I mean, I'm sure there's even more things. You've outlined 3 different sort of avenues we can go to. Why don't we develop the conversation and have you back and do another podcast on it? Are you up for that?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Cool, man. Okay, well, let's do that. Thanks very much for coming on the show today, and you take good care, and we'll speak to you again soon, yeah?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'll see you around.
Bye now. Okay then, Paul, are you up there in the space station?
I'm just finishing up a game of Risk with my fellow astronauts, and I'll tell you what, that was a dark session.
A space Risk, was it?
Yeah.
Actually, I love that game. I really love that game. I mean, I said in the interview that I wasn't really a gamer type, but as that interview seeped into my brain, I started to realize that actually I do quite like games, and Risk, there's another one.
Risk is the best.
Where you can be a warring fucking bastard. I swore a lot in this interview, which is unusual. I've done it again now without realizing.
A swearing one. We'll put
Okay, we'll put one of those little warnings on. Okay, so Paul, what do you give me some feedback? What do you think to Mike's contribution?
I loved it. I thought that was a really terrific half hour. I couldn't believe how much fun I was having listening to it, and like it's such a peculiar subject. Like how are we doing art and politics and gaming? But he had it. He had the answers. He's like, oh no, this is a really important part of it. I think you used the word anthropology earlier when we were like prepping for this, and I just thought, yeah, he's right, because the thing about human interaction is we we deal with each other through constructions, don't we? Through constructs, and some of those are provided to us, like the working environment, and some of them are provided to us through just a social environment of, say, the pub. Like, you think about a pub, there are certain rules, and there are certain things that aren't rules that would be regarded as impositions if you cross them. Well, when you've got a game and humans are interacting with a game, it's like we get to choose the nature of that construct, maybe.
Yeah, I think. Well, that's what came out, and I think there's loads of stuff in there that we could go off on. But I think the one thing that did come out in there was this. There was a comment that I think I'm quoting him right, is where he said that we're in a golden age of gaming, which triggered my brain. Are we? I thought, yeah, we are. When I look around me at my friends, and then he said that, and I had my example as well of the quiz and whatever. And then he said it seems like today that it's a revolutionary act of just getting people together around a table. And I thought, you know what, that's right. And it's almost like what triggered my mind is my dad's generation. When he was a boy, he used to talk about his family getting around the piano, and you know, that's what was triggered. Is like, okay, so what we're talking about here is humanity getting together a little bit, and that's very political. And obviously games and playing and these things is all about being creative, role playing, all this stuff. So I think you're right. It was quite fascinating stuff, and lots for us to chew over, I think.
You see, the sort of slightly downer narrative at the moment is that we've stopped having familial relationships with each other, that we're breaking away, that the teenagers all have a TV and a games console in their own room, and they break off
the extreme, you mean like the sort of extreme individualization of human beings and sort of modern capitalism, almost like a continuation for those people who knew the lady Margaret Thatcher, that we don't have a society and we're all individuals, that kind of ideology. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, technology has freed us from being dependent upon sitting around the same fire, you know,
right, yes.
And that became the TV, and then we had individual TVs, and now we're gaming consoles as a whole. I mean, I know that's not part of this discussion. We're going to get into.
Well, it is and it isn't. When I spoke to Mike previous, we sort of decided at this stage, let's do one bit of it. You know, and it is something that's got to come out in the discussions, and that's why we're going to do more than one. We're going to do a series with Mike, you know, and we'll come on to some of that other stuff, and I think that's important. Good. Sorry, continue on your point, though, Paul.
Yeah. Well, it's just that it's interesting that through, and I know that it's a little bit tart to sort of make this. That's not the right word. And it's a little bit. It feels like I'm forcing the issue a little bit. If I go like, well, with the COVID crisis that's very present at the moment, it kind of feels like one of the aspects of COVID has had some unexpected results. And you were talking about your family and the quiz probably started out like as a joke or something. What you were saying, like they just started doing it.
Yeah, it started out as bingo, and then somebody I think one week said, "Let's do a quiz," and I was like, "Oh God," you know, because I'm not very good at that kind of social interaction. And and it materialized, and now it was only in this show it really, when just as I was talking to Mike live, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, yes.
Well, didn't Mike say something about the virtual table? Because with the technology that we've got now, the very technology that we thought was forcing the family apart, suddenly with the COVID crisis, and now it's so much more common for families to be scattered over larger areas, sometimes different countries like yourself and stuff like that. You know, with the technology we've got now, like you can create a virtual table to sit around and have a quiz, and you're actually using the game as a construct to maintain. Because I mean, if you think about it, like families know most of the stuff they need to know. Unless there's a crisis of some kind, and you don't want that, you haven't got a lot to talk about. What a quiz or a game does is it enables like the disparate members of the family to focus on this one thing, and then all of the natures of the people involved, their character, if they're the funny one can be funny, the practical one can be practical, the knowledgeable one can be knowledgeable, and everybody gets to sort of throw in a little, ideally, we're going to get into that later actually, but basically, and I was really heartwarmed by that, because what he was saying was, there's a lot of doom and gloom about, But he's saying one of the reactions, one of the wonderful things about this doom and gloom situation is that people are utilizing the format of gaming to have meaningful interactions with their family. And when you think that there's so much,
and in that regard, family could mean friends. I think
extend family, but
extended social group maybe. I just think it's important because not everybody. There's some people out there that don't spend time with their family for good reason sometimes. Anyway, sorry, go on, Paul.
Well, no, just say. The story you gave, and I mean, why do you think I'm up here in outer space? But
yeah. Well, why do you think we sent you there? You're part of the family, but you can say just where you are. Thank you very much.
Like you far away. No, basically, no. The story you gave was perfect because you were talking about like how, because obviously, I think you're in Spain. I think a lot of your brothers are scattered, aren't you? And
everybody's not everybody's everywhere, but we're a world lot, but most of us are in England. But even we're spread
one continent at a time each.
Yeah, there's only space enough. you need our own countries. Anyway, no, go on. We're diverging down.
I beg your pardon. Basically, the story you gave was a really good example, and that's just you by chance being like, about it. I bet it's going on all over the place. I bet there's people playing. Yes. Like really complex card games over Zoom and stuff.
And there's also people who get into this world who rely on it for this, which I hadn't thought of either. I got a friend here in Barcelona, and he goes to gaming clubs. I was always thinking, that's a bit strange, they meet like-minded people. It's a social interaction, but I think it forms a very important part of the bonding. And when we talk about politics in this show, when we talk about the ideas of socialism and these things, we're living in a capitalist world that always breaks that shit up. And there's always a reaction to that, and this seems to me to be one of the positive things that's going on. There is a movement, or what Mike said, a golden age of people coming together around, as you said, the virtual, and he said, I think, the virtual table, but also the real table when they can as well. So I mean, that's a good thing, isn't it?
I love the idea, and this is something that emerged in one of the interviews in the first series. I love the idea that despite what feels like a very austere time and there's a lot of paranoia around, says Paul Paranoid, about the situation we're in and whether or not the government are trying to shape society. I love it when humanity bounces back and just carries on being human. Just love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely.
But there was a bit in the interview that really chimed with me, and I wanted to get into, and that was, for me, the star turn of the interview was the Monopoly bit.
Yes.
And I was absolutely cooking when he started talking about Monopoly, because I've always hated Monopoly. Mm. Do you have that relationship with Monopoly?
I have a love-hate relationship with it. As I said in the interview, it releases a side of my evil character. And I tell you what, I don't lose very often at Monopoly.
See that?
Yeah. I mean, it brings out the competitive side of me and the non-socialist side of me and all this kind of stuff. So, it's a love-hate relationship, I would say.
Well, let's get into that briefly, because I'm fascinated, because you're such the sort of the Marxist ideology kind of guy. I'm not saying it proliferates all the way through all of your worldview, but you certainly know about it, and you're certainly can wield it. Much more knowledgeable than I am about these things. I'm sympathetic to it, but I'm just not the expert on it. You are. I'm kind of like a sort of, I'm sort of like a kind of Orwellian sort of sympathizer, But basically,
I think that builds me up a bit too big, but I'll take it.
But let me put it this way: if I needed to know more about Marxism on any given day, I'd come to you. So the point is that you must experience some interesting conflicts when you're playing. Like, it must be interesting for you because it runs the nature of Monopoly. It must run counter to a great deal.
I think this is what we were kind of talking about in in like the sort of a human study of it, like a release, because we live in this society. We don't live in a socialist utopia. I might wish that we did. I might fight for a program and an ideology that gets us there. We might do a podcast that hopefully inspires people that socialism and art are very connected and therefore important. But I live in capitalism. But I don't want to go out and do the things that I'm kind of urged to do by the setup of the situation, And it's even like with this false analogy. Let's say Grand Theft Auto. We're going into the video games. It's just what comes into my head. Yeah. People love playing that game because they can jump out of a car with a gun and shoot somebody and nick their car. Yeah. Now, I've played the game. I don't do it a lot, but it's quite fun to do that, and that's really weird. That's really anti-human.
To not do what you do in real life.
Yeah, it's almost like taboos and all this kind of stuff. And we'd have to discuss capitalism and how it makes us, how it develops us, and how we respond. But the fact that it is a world that puts lots of negatives in our minds because of how the economic order and how it's all set up. The fact that in a game scenario you can be it for a little bit is actually a relief. I don't know whether I'm right going down that line. Maybe I'm actually just a narcissistic nasty. Maybe that's what I find, that I think it's okay, to at least be in that environment. It's safe. It's a safe way to release.
Yeah. We all have narcissistic characteristics, and I'm glad that's come up because I want to get into that now. But like, basically, I think you're right. I think that monopoly.
Just let me say one more thing that he said, which I thought was cracking on this. That the games, and not just a monopoly, but games create a family space for you to be a jerk, a safe space. And that. Yeah,
nice.
Sorry.
That's good. That sets me up perfectly for my next bit, because basically, he said when he revealed that monopoly, because my hatred of monopoly goes all the way back to me seeing the effect this game had on some people I was playing it with when I was a child, and I'm very suspicious, and I think you'd say rightly so, of the kind of capitalist Darwinian survival of the fittest model that I feel that we're presented with quite early on when we introduced it to society. I never found it. I was never comfortable with it, and I'm still not comfortable with it now. It's never worked for me. So when I see something that appears to sort of exemplify it and kind of like encourage it, like this game, I found that completely heartbreaking. And basically, when Mike revealed that the game was created as a warning kind of thing, it was created to teach you, to sort of give you a chance to sort of virtual reality capitalism and see what a heartless and cruel game it is. Here's the thing though, one Christmas we spent some time with a family that I now realise were the classic narcissistic family unit. I'm not going to go off on one because we're going to say, it's not, we've already done quite a lot of time today, but one day we're going to go into more detail about this. But in the narcissistic family unit, you tend to have the head of the family who is a narcissist. And that means basically they're very self-involved, they're very controlling, and they preside as king over the whole family. And it's one of those don't do as I do as I say sort of things. But it's pathological. It's quite a dark thing. Then the partner of that, the queen, if you will, tends to either be an enabler or a victim or both, or a narcissist as well. And basically, they tend to apologise. If they're an enabler, they apologise for the narcissist. Then in the children, you have an array of situations, but there's always one target, one scapegoat, who has to bear the ills of the whole family, and there's one golden child who can do no wrong. And the narcissist lavishes love and attention. It's not really love, but on the golden child. The scapegoat is stuck with all the shit. Between those two poles, if there are more than two kids, there'll be a kind of a middle ground, a kind of a spectrum. But there's always two distinct ones. So we were at this family's house, and Monopoly was the Christmas present, and out it came.
Out came capitalism in this
and
environment.
I watched the target lose miserably, with
Right.
seething, with impotent rage. Nothing that they could do seemed to work. And I watched the golden child win, and the narcissistic father of the family watch with sort of glowing devotion for all, and I know that the dice is doing its job. I know it, but it was almost like there was a supernatural element in play, and I really thought, I didn't know then what I know now about the narcissistic family unit or what was happening, but I remember thinking, like, this is just horrific. And we're teaching kids this. So when Mike said, actually, it's a didactic tool to make people wake up to the inhumanity of capitalism. I know those weren't his words. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I got from it. I was like, hallelujah, man. It was like when somebody points out, you're worried all your life about something.
Yeah.
And somebody just says, touch on the shoulder and say, no, it wasn't you that broke that. I'd broken it the day before. And it's like years of horror just fall away.
Well, Paul, I mean, it's a fascinating view on it. I mean, and I think the fact that we can develop all these stories about game situations, which are very human, about how we interact with each other and how games interact with the society and all this stuff. You can see where, maybe we should just finish on this point. You can see why Mike's, you couldn't see it because it was obviously, this is a audio broadcast, but when he was talking about why he does these games, and he was talking about an experience that he developed a game and then watched the people and then watched their pleasure, and we were talking about being an artist in that environment, he was glowing, with it. It was like, and I think really the games are more interesting than we thought. Well, certainly for me, as an analytical tool, as an understanding of society, I think we can make a lot more of this game situation. So why don't we play a bit longer, Paul, and get Mike back and see where it goes?
I think this could be a good third of the series if we get Mike back a couple of times. Because I think we won't overload the series with it, but yeah, we definitely get him back a couple of times. Yeah, and I think the art thing, right? This is what I really liked about it. Like in the first series, the premise was like, we never got to the bottom of it, but we'll come back. The first premise of it was like, can you call yourself an artist, and what is an artist, and all that stuff. Well, now we're actually asking what art is, because he's put this really good case. Because we think of art as we think of gaming as a pastime, a hobby, or something you do to waste time. He's put the case for it having a constructive, meaningful, interactive role in human beings experimenting, understanding, and appreciating and growing together. And if that isn't art,
yeah, it's big. It's a big point.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear Jonas. I can hear the rope being pulled in. So we're going to leave it there for today, Paul. And I'll see you again next week. So you enjoy your time up there. Don't be too alone, and play some online gaming with somebody to interact with them.
I think they want another round of Risk. Yuri wants another round of Risk. I don't know.
You and your alien mates. I don't know. Okay, mate. We'll see you again soon. Take care now. Bye.
Cheerio.
Thank you, Mike, for being our guest today, and Rob and Paul for the insights from the space station. We are now playing you 3 poems called Fear, Rain, and 19 by Steve Nally. Enjoy.
Fear. In green, paramedics appear, young, swag bags in tow. Test the oxygen flow, then it's time to go, don't forget your phone. Silence, the realisation of leaving home, to glide past the river, Parliament, red buses, as if forever passes in a breath of air that my body craves. Familiar voices chant, be brave, embrace. The strip lights, the observations, hushed conversations, bloods, tests, drips, the cold cheese sarnie, sugar tea to sip. The touch of strangers who've been good soldiers, show no fear of danger, Just love, tenderness for a man in a mess, unshaven, unwashed, sweat-soaked, choked by fear. Closed curtains hide that secret tear to 60 good years. A release from the past as all becomes a present, a roller coaster ride to the other side. Rain. Family, friends come tumbling in through holes in my roof I never repair. Open to the stars, dreams of afar and rain. Here they cascade with ice-cold beers, chips and dips, as my sore heart flips, again and again. 19. It did not march, it flew, economy, bucket, business, boarding pass free, to many, minuscule, unknown, blown across fresh spring skies, until a gust became a breath, a rasp, a mask, so to breathe, believe, say goodbye. Take a moment to reflect upon having survived. Alive, joy, first ice cream of summer dribbles down my chin, sticky, icky fun. A Bellington turns, runs into a memory. The park is a multicoloured plaid. The trees are green, peu d'ombre helicide, very green.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have something to say to us, then join our Facebook group or contact us at outa-space.com. That's outa-space.com. See you soon!